F1 on BBC Radio 5 Sports Extra.
A very good evening to you. It's round 23 of the Formula One World Championship. We're in Qatar, where the sun has set over the Lusail International Circuit. Just north of Doha lies this 5.4 kilometre track, 16 turns, 6 to the left, 10 to the right, with a mixture of high and medium speed corners about to be graced by 20 drivers setting the fastest laps they can. It's time, almost, for the final sprint qualifying of the year. My name's Harry Benjamin. Alongside me for this one is the former McLaren mechanic Mark Priestley, the BBC's F1 correspondent Andrew Benson, and down roaming the paddock for us, our eyes and ears on the ground, is Rosanna Tennant. Good evening, Rosanna.
Harry Benjamin, it sounds like I'm in a jazz bar. There is a jazz saxophonist serenading us down here on the ground in the paddock and pit lane. So it's quite a nice little atmosphere. It's dark, the lights are on, and this paddock is pretty special. It's all lit up. It's a very new age, very techie paddock. We've got all the signs above the hospitality units and above the garages. They're digital, so lots of bright lights and yeah, lots of music, as you can hear. But the excitement is building because on a sprint weekend, everything ramps up so quickly, doesn't it? First practice, only practice, and then here we go, straight into sprint qualifying. So nice atmosphere, very buzzy down here in the paddock.
Certainly sounds it, doesn't it? There is a barber shop in the paddock, Rosanna, if you fancy getting the haircut in between quali sessions.
Oh, I had my roots done before I came out here.
Efficiency. We like it, Rosanna. We'll come back to you throughout the course of this qualifying session. A few minutes still to get underway, and if you need a reminder just how sprint qualifying works, it is essentially the same as normal qualifying, but the sessions are a little shorter. SQ1 is 12 minutes, the second part of qualifying, SQ2, reduced to 10 minutes, and SQ3 is just 8 minutes long. And while the teams are free to use any of their available tyres in regular qualifying, in this qualifying, sets of new medium tyres mandatory in SQ1 and SQ2, and then in SQ3 drivers must run the soft tyre, but they don't have to be a new set. So that is how sprint qualifying will work, and what will be, as I say, the final one of the season. Mark Priestley, at the moment we've only got one practice session to go off, but it certainly looks like it could be a good battle this weekend between Ferrari and McLaren.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sort of that's the picture of the championship, isn't it? The one title still left to be decided, the constructors title, and it looks like it's between those two teams. McLaren kind of with that lead that they have at the moment, with a car that's been developed to such an extraordinary rate over the second half of this season. Generally, people assuming that is the quickest car in most conditions in the second half of the year. But Ferrari, a team really in the ascendancy over the last few rounds, with two really strong and experienced drivers, and that could be crucial in the last two races. Those two teams in the championship picture look like the closest, and as you rightly say, from practice session earlier on today, it looked like around this circuit in these conditions they were also the two quickest teams, with Charles Leclerc seemingly like the quickest out of all four of those drivers so far.
Andrew, what is it about this track that perhaps either suits the McLarens more so than the Ferraris? What are the characteristics that we know Ferrari weren't really looking forward to this weekend?
Well, we don't know yet whether it will suit the McLaren more than the Ferrari. It didn't look like it in first practice, did it? But in theory, the McLaren has been quicker in the sort of medium to high-speed corners this year. The Red Bull's the fastest car in the high-speed corners, and the Ferrari's strength is in low speed. And this track, if anyone looks at the layout, is basically nearly all medium and high-speed corners, with a couple of exceptions, maybe turn 6, the hairpin there. Everything else is pretty quick. So that's why Ferrari were worried about this race, and why McLaren thought that this would be a good one for them. I don't think we should read too much into first practice, or practice I should say, because it's the only practice session as opposed to qualifying practice. But let's see what happens. But Charles Leclerc looked particularly strong, and too strong really for it to be real. By nearly half a second quicker than everybody else he was in the first session. So let's see if the form book plays out in qualifying now.
Well, just a few moments away from getting the green light at the end of the pit lane. Rosanna, this time last year, Qatar was in a slightly different place in the calendar just a few weeks earlier, and it was immensely hot. Conditions slightly different though this weekend.
Really different. It is amazing what a difference just a few weeks make. It's about 18 degrees now. Okay, the sun set. It set about 4 hours ago, but the temperature has dropped dramatically. It's about 18 degrees. The wind wind has slightly dropped as well. It was very breezy earlier on, so that kind of means that the dust gets blown onto the track, but that has dropped, so is the temperature, and that of course poses another challenge for the drivers, and they are now starting to head out on track, Harry, because we've got a green light at the end of the pit lane.
We certainly do, as Lance Stroll in the Aston Martin leads them out. He actually had a strong end to his free practice one outing, but Aston Martin generally lacking pace, haven't scored points in 8 races, has Lance Stroll, so looking to try and find some way forward this weekend, along with Fernando Alonso, who is his first podium was here back in 2021. That was his first podium since 2014. What do you want to say, Benny?
I was going to say, I think he had a few podiums.
Oh, I know, he's had a few before then. His first, in his comeback, in his second comeback for Fernando Alonso.
That was a brilliant drive. He's scored points more recently than the last 8 races, hasn't he, Harry?
Yes, Alonso has, yeah. Alonso,
the good Aston Martin driver has
but it's a longer gap than you think it is, though. You've got to go back to Singapore for Fernando Alonso. So Aston Martin continue to be in a rough patch of form, very much full focus on them for next season. And of course, big changes coming their way in the future. See how they gear up. But right now then, SQ1 is underway. 10 minutes and 48, 47, 46 seconds remain. The Mercedes, Mark, aren't keen to go out straight away. Still a few last minute jobs going on the front end of George Russell's Mercedes, which is still parked up in his garage.
Yeah, it's one of those circuits that evolves quite a lot. It's not used much over the course of the year, certainly not for car racing. A lot of motorbikes run around here, but that means that it's a very green track at this early point in the weekend, very low grip, and the more and more running we get, particularly with Formula 1 cars. There's a few support races as well this weekend, but the more Formula 1 cars we get running around, they lay more rubber down, and the more that rubber goes down, the more the grip just ramps up, and therefore the lap time starts to fall. So you want to be out early just to get your banker lap in. As Andrew said, only the one practice session on a sprint weekend, so just getting a feel for how the conditions have changed since earlier on in the day is important. But your real flat out laps, the laps that are going to get you through from this first part of qualifying, SQ1 through into SQ2, they're probably likely to come much later in the session.
Yeah, the first laps then starting to gear up. We will of course eliminate the slowest 5 drivers come the end of the next 9 minutes and 40 seconds as we set the grid for the sprint race, the 100-kilometre dash. That'll take place tomorrow. You can hear that from 1:55 in the afternoon on 5 Sports Extra. But Carlos Sainz then embarking on his first flyer of the session in the Ferrari, the man who will depart the Scuderia at the end of the season. He won't have to wait long before he gets his first taste of Williams machinery, doing a filming day straight after the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix on the Monday before taking part in the post-season test as well. But trying then to finish off his stint at Ferrari on a positive, a great run, managing to clinch the final place on the podium in Vegas last weekend after what was a pretty rough weekend for Ferrari in terms of the strategy. Neither driver coming away from that weekend particularly happy, but they were quick out the blocks in FP1, but as we said, so hard to get a proper read in that first practice session.
Yeah, it really was. There's just not enough time for them or us to get a full picture, but that's kind of great, isn't it? We're going into this session not really knowing who's going to be the dominant force, if indeed there is going to be one. I think the likes of Ferrari, the likes of McLaren will be there. I'm pretty sure we're going to see Max Verstappen in and around that picture towards the front. We didn't see that this morning either. Didn't get a very clear run. There's a lot of traffic, and that's a feature now as well, with just 8 minutes left on this clock. Almost everybody, I think, out on the circuit right now. So a very busy racetrack, and negotiating that traffic, finding the right gap and staying out of the way of other people is a real key part of this. The other major factor that's really going to play into this, as Rosanna said, is temperature. Just over 18 degrees. That is so much colder than we've ever experienced at any of these Middle Eastern races, and that really affects how the tyres perform with their generating grip into the racetrack. So that's a steep learning curve for everybody now.
Not quite as cool as the temperatures we experienced in Las Vegas, but is the drop in temperature that could potentially help Mercedes out at a track like this?
Well, we know the Mercedes definitely runs better. It tends to warm up its tyres very quickly, which in cold conditions is great. In hot conditions, they tend to overheat their tyres as a result of that characteristic. So this is something that will favour Mercedes a little bit more. I don't think the racetrack's necessarily going to suit Mercedes. We're looking at probably McLaren and Ferrari, where the two that you would look on paper where it would suit them, and we'll have to see how that really plays plays out, but temperature's going to be a major factor.
Fastest lap so far goes to Charles Leclerc with a 1:23.2. Then it's Verstappen, Bottas, Sainz and Hulkenberg's just got up into the top 5. Still waiting for half the field to set their first proper lap times though. Now, this is the sound of Lando Norris in the McLaren, making his way through the sweeping left-hander of turn 10 that leads you through the flat-out left-hander of turn 11 before you stamp lightly on the brakes, turned it into the almost triple right-hander, 12, 13 and 14, hitting the apexes. Purple sector 1, purple sector 2, fastest of anybody in the field, manages to keep it neat and tidy through the left-hander of turn 15. Bit of traffic, gets nicely out of his way. Traffic management going to be a huge issue in this first qualifying session. Round the final corner and across the line for Lando Norris, and it's fastest, a 1:22.7, almost half a second clear of the field.
I tell you, it's not a look at this track, but that combination of corners 12, 13, 14 is incredible. Really brilliant section of corners there. And by the way, Ferraris, we are seeing the form that we expected from the McLaren. That's nearly half a second. Norris was quicker than Leclerc on that lap. As Piastri comes to the end of his lap, we'll see what he does when he crosses the line. But at Ferrari, Leclerc's advantage over Sainz continues to be significant as it was in first practice.
Oscar Piastri across the line though, a little slower than his teammate, only enough for 6th place, 7/10 down on Lando Norris, for the man who won the sprint race last year in sprint pole as well in Sao Paulo just a couple of weeks ago for Piastri. It was this time last year, or at this track last year at least, that he took a win of any kind in Formula One. So good memories for the Australian only in his second season. Hamilton crosses the line, slots in just behind Piastri down in 9th. His teammate though, George Russell, has managed to get within half a tenth of a second of Lando Norris, up into second. This is only SQ1 though, and our main focus will be on the slowest 5 drivers failing to get out of that elimination zone right now. Sergio Perez is one of them in the second Red Bull, continuing to have a tough time out there. Sainz is going again though, fastest of anybody in the first sector.
Yeah, the times are tumbling. As we said, the circuit is evolving. It's getting quicker and quicker the more this rubber goes down. We've got a good lap from Lance Stroll popping up into P4 at the moment. Magnussen's up in P3. Valtteri Bottas on a pretty decent lap for him. Is there a possibility of getting a first point for the Sauber team? They scored nothing all season, been pretty disastrous. Races like this, where there's a slight anomaly with things like the temperature changing so dramatically, could they just take advantage of that and capitalise as the 2 Ferraris find themselves back at the top of the timesheets? Leclerc about a 10th ahead of Sainz.
Then it's Norris, Russell, Magnussen 5th ahead of Bottas, Stroll, Alonso, Verstappen and Tsunoda at the top 10. Then it's Piastri in 11th ahead of Hamilton. Joe is 13th. Then comes Pierre Gasly, Hulkenberg, Ocon, Perez, Colapinto and Liam Lawson 20th and last. He just ran out wide. We're just seeing some replays and getting the front left and the rear left wheels onto the gravel and riding along the exit curve. Sparks flying from the underside of that RB floor, not doing the wooden plank that lies below any good whatsoever.
No, they've made some changes to the curbs from last year at many places around this racetrack just to try and soften them off. They've sort of shaved off the sharp edges that were a real feature last year, and Pirelli do think may have contributed to some of the issues they had with tyres. So that's an attempt to try and protect the Pirelli rubber on the cars. But running wide at that point is definitely going to damage the underside. We just seen a lap from Max Verstappen, the first real flying lap. We didn't get a clear lap from him this morning, and it looked relatively like a clear lap, like it didn't seem to have too many issues with traffic. He's about 4/10 off the lead Ferrari of Charles Leclerc. So early stages, and it is his very first run, but early signs looking like he's not entirely comfortable yet.
Sergio Perez, that's the sound you're hearing now. He needs a better lap. He's down in 18th right now with just 3 minutes and 20 seconds on the clock. But both McLarens are going again. Norris is fast in the middle sector. Piastri is good in the first sector. Perez crosses the line, gets up to 9th, but he's 9/10 down on Lando Norris, who's just gone even quicker now to reclaim that top spot, a 1:22.0. This is the sound of Lando Norris's teammate, Oscar Piastri, making his way through the flat-out left-hander, almost flat out of turn 15, keeps it neatly planted, then eases off the brakes, arcs it through the right-hander that seals off a lap, keeps it within the white lines, to the line for Piastri, does improve, 3rd fastest, not quite as quick as his teammate, but a better second effort from the Aussie.
So pretty much what we thought we might see, 2 Ferraris, 2 McLarens inside the top 4 at the moment. Verstappen just behind in 5th. Look at Perez. He's down in P10. He's behind Valtteri Bottas. As you said, almost a second off the lead McLaren of Lando Norris. This is the reason that Red Bull Racing are not really in this hunt for the Constructors' Championship, because only one of their drivers is consistently scoring. He's got to do better than that.
Tell you what, George Russell is putting in a solid effort in the Mercedes. In fact, he set an identical lap time to Lando Norris, but because Russell set it second, he slots in behind. So it's Norris and Russell, identical laps at the top of the field, a 1:22.021. 2 minutes to go. And
Hamilton's still struggling, Harry. 6/10 off Russell on that run. They're running at more or less the same time, Russell and Hamilton, one after the other. And Hamilton's not been able to get anywhere near his teammates so far in this qualifying session.
Well, the stats don't make for good reading when it comes to Lewis Hamilton. Consistently out-qualified, has lost the qualifying battle this year when it comes to head-to-heads against George Russell. Those in the drop zone, though, right now, it's the 2 Aston Martins of Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso. Then it's the Sauber of Zhou Guanyu, the Haas of Nico Hülkenberg, which is unusual. Normally he is able to get himself through and up into a high qualifying position. Kevin Magnussen is up in 10th right now, and Franco Colapinto never raced around this track. Indeed, has an old spec car as well after his big crash in Q2 in Las Vegas. Has that affected perhaps some of his confidence in getting the most out of his machinery? He's right now 20th and last. Compare that to his teammate Alex Albon, who's up in 14th at the moment.
Well, from Franco Colapinto's perspective, of course there's a bit of pressure on him after what happened in Vegas, where he destroyed another one of those very precious Williams cars. An awful lot of work inside that garage and a lot of money spent at the team. But this is a racetrack where there's a huge amount of runoff area. There's gravel traps that tends to catch you rather than walls. So he should be free to kind of push and really go for it around this racetrack. You're right, he's learning the circuit, and with only one practice session, that of course becomes a little bit harder. But we'd expect a little bit more from him, and the more will come, the more we get through this weekend.
Well, on better laps this time around, Nico Hülkenberg is going well. Lance Stroll is finding time. Fernando Alonso is coming through the middle sector as well. All of those drivers vying to get themselves out of the elimination zone. It's the slowest 5 that will be eliminated as we set the grid for the final sprint race of the season. Ocon's just improved in his Alpine to get himself up into 9th spot. The clock is ticking down with just 5 seconds left to go. Colapinto's got across the line to start one final fly. Good improvement from Lance Stroll up to 6th. Alonso is almost half a second up in the middle sector. Track evolution perhaps playing its part in the closing stages. Norris cements fastest overall, 1:21.3. Magnussen's up to 7th. What about his teammate Hülkenberg, who's down in 19th? Can he improve? Yes, he can. Slots in behind his teammate up to 8th. All eyes on Fernando Alonso, and he's straight up into the top 6. Good lap from the Spaniard, and that puts down Sergio Perez down into the drop zone. He's on a lap at the moment. He's looking like he will improve. He does, but it's only enough for 13th spot. That puts Bottas back down into the elimination zone. Lawson straight through. Albon and Zhou in trouble down in 18th and 19th. What a lap from Valtteri Bottas in the Sauber up to 7th.
And keep an eye on Tsunoda. Could Tsunoda knock out Perez? Perez right on the cusp in 15th.
Yep.
Could be about to be dropped out of qualifying in the very first part.
I think he will be. I think he will be, because this is a decent lap from Albon across the line. He gets up into 15th, and that puts Perez down into 16th. And Perez has taken the checkered flag. He will not be able to improve. That is a 7th time this season that Sergio Perez has been knocked out in the first part of any qualifying session. Yuki Tsunoda, with all the talk this week surrounding his Red Bull test after the season with Abu Dhabi, trying to put himself in the frame for Sergio Perez's seat. Well, the Japanese driver has been out-qualified by his teammate Liam Lawson, who escapes through in that elimination zone. Perez 16th, Tsunoda 17th, Ocon 18th, ahead of Zhou and Colapinto. And that was Sergio Perez with some expletives there. Not happy with that. He's 1.3 seconds off Lando Norris's fastest time. His teammate, to put that in perspective, Max Verstappen, finished 4th, 6/10 off of the McLaren.
And that, you know, that shows a bit of a picture there, doesn't it? Kind of what we thought coming into the session, that it is Verstappen who's clearly the faster of the 2 Red Bulls, but even he not comfortable, certainly nowhere near as comfortable as the guys up front. Whilst all that was happening down the back in the knockout zone, Lando Norris went even quicker again and has put another 4/10 over the second place car, which is now Carlos Sainz. So still time in the bag for Lando Norris, going quicker and quicker as that session unfolded.
Charles Leclerc was having a nice battle in qualifying. I'm sure neither of them found it nice, going down towards turn one with Sergio Perez. They're like both of them trying to start a flying lap. Leclerc had the inside, Perez the outside.
I don't know what Leclerc was doing there.
And that was what Perez had to say. That I don't know what Leclerc was doing. They're racing each other in this first part of qualifying.
Well, the problem with that was they didn't figure out that positioning long before the lap started, so they got into their flying lap, both fighting for the same spot.
Don't block me.
That was Gasly in the Alpine, finding a lot of traffic coming into that final corner. It looks like he'll get away with it because he's made it through into the second part of sprint qualifying. Gasly finished 13th, has managed to out-qualify Esteban Ocon, who will not make it through down in P18 for the Frenchman. He is out in SQ1 for the third consecutive sprint weekend. And for Yuki Tsunoda, that is his third SQ1 elimination in the 6 sprint weekends we've had this year. Here he is.
I don't understand why we're so rushing in this qualifying, honestly.
A frustrated driver then on the radio, feeling like the preparation going into that sprint qualifying maybe wasn't the best it could have been.
Well, I've never met a driver who gets knocked out in the first part of qualifying who's not frustrated, so that's not a surprise. Big shout out to Valtteri Bottas, by the way, up in P9, and I know it's only the first part of qualifying, but that for them is a really strong result. And this car around this racetrack really seeming to come alive in these conditions. Early days, but that's a really strong start.
They've been putting some upgrades on that Sauber in the last few races, and they've been quite confident that they were going to be quite effective. So it's quite surprising, for example, that Valtteri Bottas didn't have a particularly good weekend in Las Vegas. He was knocked out in Q1 there, which Zhou Guanyu wasn't, which rather suggests on the basis of their form this year that Bottas didn't get the most out of his car. But they have definitely been moving forward, Sauber. They needed to, but this is just more evidence of that.
Yeah, it certainly is. And in Qatar last year, both Saubers scored points in the Grand Prix. Valtteri Bottas finished 8th and Zhou Guanyu finished 9th. That is, at the moment, the last time Sauber scored points. So they will be desperately hoping to try and get off the mark before the year is out, not wanting to finish pointless before they slowly morph in to Audi. Let's head down to Rosanna Tennant.
That was a disappointing session for Esteban Ocon as well, guys. 18th for him, and he's just been walking down the pit lane looking a little bit disappointed. Obviously, helmet still on, so you never quite see the facial expressions, but just the way he was conducting himself, he just looked disappointed. And of course, Alpine in the mix for that P6 position in the Constructors' Championship. So that will be a missed opportunity for the French driver. Of course, this is only setting the grid for the sprint race, but that may well sort of indicate how Alpine are going to go for the rest of the weekend. But yes, disappointing for Ocon, and I echo Mark's thoughts on Valtteri Bottas. It's amazing when there's a little bit of talk about your future in the run-up to a weekend, suddenly it all comes together. Of course, there have been upgrades, like Andrew says, but Bottas, of course, talking about his future, whether that's at Mercedes, could it be even at Red Bull as a reserve driver, or even a number 2 driver to Max Verstappen in the future. It's funny what a little bit of a spotlight does to a driver sometimes.
Well, it's amazing when you find out you've been sacked. More often than not, you start to improve your performances, don't you? Indeed, Valtteri Bottas saying he actually turned down an offer to race in IndyCar next year for a full season, saying he's not ready, would rather prioritise somehow remaining in Formula One. The most likely route, we believe, will be through a return to Mercedes as a reserve driver.
Yeah, Mick Schumacher, son of 7-time world champ Michael, has just this week announced that he's left Mercedes from that role, so that leaves that role open. Here's Tsunoda.
I don't understand, man.
Yeah, copy, Yuki. I hear you. We're a bit short.
Yeah, you don't hear me, man.
He can get a bit feisty on the radio, and he has just been knocked out, as I said. So he is angry, he is frustrated, and we don't know the full story, but these little details are the things that matter. So getting out of the garage in a calm, controlled manner at exactly the right moment. If it feels flustered at the point when you leave the garage, it's in your head. It continues to be flustered, or it can be. You find yourself in the wrong position on the racetrack. You're trying to figure out your space around the lap in the moments when you should be preparing tyres, and all these little tiny details tend to build stalled into what then ends up being a disappointing lap. So maybe that's what we're seeing there.
He had a decent run of form, has Tsunoda as well. Qualified in the top 7 and scored points in the last 2 consecutive Grand Prix. So he's in a bit of a rich vein of form at the moment. So adding to the frustrations of being knocked out in that first qualifying session for the sprint. So just to reiterate, we've lost Sergio Perez in 16th ahead of Yuki Tsunoda, Esteban Ocon's Alpine in 18th, Zhou Guanyu in 19th for Sauber, and Franco Colapinto 20th and last, as SQ2 is now underway. 9 minutes and 30 seconds on the clock, and Max Verstappen, the 2 Haas cars and the 2 Ferraris are straight out onto the track.
Yeah, Verstappen's got work to do. He doesn't want to be left behind. I know he's the world champion and there's not too much in his world to play for. The Constructors' Championship seems like a very distant long shot, although mathematically they're still in it. They definitely need 2 cars to be able to fight for that, and already in this session we've only got 1 left. But he doesn't seem comfortable yet. He's certainly not towards the front. He's not in a situation where that car has come alive like he needs it to. And there's very limited amount of work they can do between now and, of course, a sprint. They'll open up Parc Fermé on Saturday morning, so they can then make changes ahead of qualifying for the main race. All is not lost in that front, but he's in a situation now where he's got the car that he's got to continue with this and make the best out of it to get through this qualifying session and then into the sprint tomorrow.
Max Verstappen has just become a 4-time world champion. Only 1 win in the last 11 Grand Prix. How's that?
Well, yes, but it's all the ones that came before that helped him get the championship.
Do you think, though, there's any... He's been coming out with some good comments this weekend about how he might have won the championship earlier if he was in a McLaren or Ferrari. Do you think he would have done?
Look, the reason Lando hasn't won the championship is not necessarily just because Lando didn't get the best out of that car. The team have made mistakes, and as I've said many times, I don't want to be too critical because they're learning how to get back to the front. And this year for McLaren has not been a failure. There's still a very good chance they could win the Constructors' Championship, but they're building towards a 2025 where really they could come out the box as favourites, and that would go down as this year being a prep year for that, which would be a major success. So I don't think anyone can be too critical, and I don't think Max Verstappen in a McLaren wins the championship. It's about who the team are, the decisions they made. There are so many races where points have been left on the table because of decisions from the pit wall decisions from the driver, a combination of the two. There are so many factors that go into winning a championship. Equally, there's no way that Max Verstappen has won this championship on his own. He's had to have the help of his own team to do that, and they've been extremely good.
So Max just wanted to stir the pot a little bit into the weekend. Absolutely.
That's what they like doing.
Loving life is Max Verstappen. He was fastest in the first sector on these opening laps. Charles Leclerc has just taken that away from him. Sainz also on a decent lap. We'll see Nico Hülkenberg come across the line first for Haas. He's laid down the mark over 1:22.416, but Leclerc already beating that one. Everyone on the medium tyre has mandated for sprint qualifying in his second part. Once again, we'll eliminate the slowest 5 drivers. Max Verstappen is just coming around the final corner now to the line for the Dutchman. Goes to the top by 0.2 of a second, a 1:22.188. But we'll see what the Ferraris have got shortly. Firstly, in the hands of the Spaniard Carlos Sainz. Not as quick for Sainz, down in 3rd.
Yeah, but Charles Leclerc's going even quicker than him. So a decent first sector for Leclerc, faster than anybody else has managed so far this session. He's about to cross the line now, and he does go quicker, but only just less than a 10th faster than Max Verstappen.
Lando Norris coming to the end of the first sector now. Decent opening gambit, not the fastest we've seen, no, in that first sector. Now making his way towards the right-hander of turn 7, sweeps it through the medium speed corner. Then it's almost a bit of a roller coaster ride down through 8, then the right-hander of 9 before you get to turn 10, which brings you back around through the left-hander, flat out kink of 11, and then you approach, well, what could be one of the best corners or set of corners that we have on this 5.4 kilometre track. A triple right-hander through 12, 13 and 14. So many cars being caught out in practice, forced to run out wide. Norris survives it, makes his way through the left-hander of turn 15. One more corner to go for the British racer. 1 sprint pole to his name in 2024. 1 sprint win as well so far. And across the line, less than 0.5 of a second splitting him and Charles Leclerc. But it's Leclerc, who still has the favour. Norris slots into second.
Yeah, this is going to be close, isn't it? This is looking like a good session ahead of us. We've got Piastri on a decent lap as well now. He's putting down a marker which, with one sector to go, looks like he's definitely on par with his teammate, if not a little bit quicker. Coming through the final sector now, but also we can look at Alex Albon on a quick lap.
Yeah.
Decent, in fact. He pops up into P6, Alex Albon, so that's a very good run from the Williams driver. Piastri now about to close out the lap, and as he comes towards the line, where is he? He pops up. Actually, what happened to Piastri?
No, yeah, he's just, I think...
Oh, he did. He got quickest.
Yeah.
He's just crossed the line and gone quickest. So just under a tenth quicker than Leclerc. So, yeah, good run from both McLarens.
Yeah, Gasly was just in front of him. He crossed the line ahead of him down in 7th. Piastri fastest, though, yes, just by less than a tenth of a second. Piastri, Leclerc, Norris, Verstappen, Hülkenberg is 5th. Then comes Sainz, Gasly, Albon, Alonso, Stroll. That is the top 10. Lawson in 11th. Still waiting lap times from Russell. That's the sound you can hear at the moment. The Mercedes driver just coming around the final corner now. We'll see where Russell puts that Mercedes up into. I think he's actually just on an out lap getting ready for his first flying lap. Then comes Hamilton, Bottas and Magnussen still to set competitive lap times out there on the circuit. As we're just getting another look at the McLaren of Oscar Piastri on his one of his laps, running out wide, clouting the gravel and bringing all that dust back onto the circuit as well.
Yeah, he will have lost a considerable amount of time there by running wide and over those curves. He still managed to do the fastest time of the session so far, but everybody pushing the limits on that corner. It's got a new gravel trap just on the far side of these shaved down curves, so slightly different to last year. They've only had one session to find out where the grip lies and get the best out of that, but everybody pushing the limits, kicking up dust and even dragging gravel onto the circuit, so that's one to watch. Verstappen exactly the same time as Oscar Piastri. This is close.
Second time in a weekend that we've had the exact same lap times being set by P1 and P2. I wonder if that's a record or not. Verstappen set it after Piastri, so he has to slot in behind. That's how the rules work, but it doesn't matter because they're both pipped by Carlos Sainz, fastest in the final sector, and goes over 2/10 clear at the top, just ahead of Charles Leclerc. But the Mercedes of George Russell is flying on his first flyer, currently down in 13th, hasn't set proper lap time on the board, might get a bit of a tow from the Williams ahead of him as he comes to the line now, and he does go top by 3/10 of a second. Are these cooler temperatures and the smoothness of the circuit helping out Mercedes and George Russell here? The question will be, can his teammate match him? The answer is no. The 7-time champion is down in 7th, 7.5 tenths off his teammate.
Well, like in the first session and earlier this morning, we're seeing massive circuit evolution. Lando Norris now on a very, very fast lap, which is going to take him right back to the top of the timesheets. He comes around the final corner, the long right-hander buries the throttle, runs over the curb and towards the line, and Lando Norris does indeed go quickest by nearly just over 2.5 tenths over Russell. So the circuit getting faster and faster and faster as this rubber goes down.
Piastri is going to have to go again because he had his lap time deleted for track limits with 2 minutes left on the clock. He finds himself down in 14th, but he's on a lap at the moment.
I have to say that's ridiculous. He goes over the track limits into the gravel and they delete his lap time.
That's what they're there for, right?
Exactly.
It's a natural penalty.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a very good point. These little strips of gravel on the outside of curbs were put there to effectively eliminate the problem of track limits. So to then penalise somebody, it seems like a slightly crazy idea. But there you go. The rules is the rules.
Exactly, and they're being applied by Rui Marquez, who is the new F1 race director, taking over from Niels Wittich. Had his first weekend out last weekend in Las Vegas, and actually having to balance Formula 1 and Formula 2 this weekend. Piastri, though, having another bite at the cherry and coming towards the line now. He's 1.3 seconds up on Liam Lawson, who's 11th, and that's enough to put him up into 3rd. McLaren 1 and 3 right now with just over a minute left. Lawson, Alonso, Stroll, Bottas and Magnussen are all at risk here. This is the sound of Lance Stroll coming around the final corner now. He's got traffic from Valtteri Bottas, but he might just be able to use that to get a bit of a tow as he comes across the line. The Canadian goes up into 9th. That puts Gasly down to 10th. Meanwhile, Albon now finds himself in trouble. He's coming through the first sector now. Kevin Magnussen has just started what will be his final flying lap. His teammate is up in 8th. Kevin Magnussen will be hoping to join the Haas driver up there as well, and it will be helpful for Haas because it is a absolutely ferocious ferocious fight for 6th in the constructors right now. A three-way fight between Haas, Alpine and RB, separated by just 4 points. The top 8 in the sprint race get points, so less points on offer, but even one could be crucial come the end of the season.
Yeah, so both Aston Martins have just scraped their way inside the top 10 at the moment, but everybody now going quicker behind them, so they may have gone a little bit early. We keep talking about circuit evolution, and in that situation you need to be on track at the fastest point, which is normally at the very end of the session. So now we've got the likes of Albon, Lawson and Bottas, maybe even Magnussen going quicker still, and the two Aston Martins could be in trouble.
I think Magnussen's lap has fallen away from him at the end of the first sector. He's still going round though. I think he had his first lap time deleted, which is why he hasn't got a lap time on the board. Stroll is the driver at risk indeed. He's bolted straight down into 11th as Alex Albon takes the checkered flag, gets that Williams up into the top 10, but can he stay there though? No is the answer. Lawson puts the RB up into 8th. Bottas will not scrape through. He has to settle for 12th. Hulkenberg improves his time. Alonso is the driver on the bubble right now. Magnussen doesn't improve. Only Stroll and Gasly can deny Fernando Alonso, and indeed he will be denied, I think, because we will see Pierre Gasly come across the line, who was quick in the first and the last sector, gets that Alpine up into 9th spot. Can Lance Stroll do anything? No, he's bailed out and come into the pits, so that'll be it then for SQ2. Fernando Alonso out in 11th, ahead of Alex Albon in the Williams 12th. Valtteri Bottas in the Sauber will be 13th, ahead of the other Aston Martin of Lance Stroll, and Kevin Magnussen's Haas 15th.
So a decent run from Bottas. It wasn't quite the fairy tale of getting inside that top 10 we thought it might be, but 13th he will line up as things stand. Still a bad run for Bottas. Bottas definitely an improvement. The two Aston Martins disappointing. Gasly with another strong performance, getting inside the top 10. He's been even higher up than that in recent rounds, but to be inside the top 10 and into that SQ3 shootout is a real strong performance for the Alpine team that struggled so heavily earlier on in the season.
I think further up the front, I think Mercedes are really starting to dip their oar into this fight that could be happening for, well, the top positions right now. It's not a slam dunk McLaren Ferrari fight. We've got Verstappen in there too, but Hamilton improved at the end of that session.
That was a good lap, man.
Yeah, that was a good effort. We are in, mate.
No way.
It was a good effort from the Kiwi. That's Liam Lawson's radio, by less than half a tenth of a second, squeezed into SQ3.
Yeah, decent, isn't it? And you can see how happy he is, because this is not just a race for qualifying and a good position for this sprint. He's talking about his career here. This is what he's fighting for. He's looking for a move up to the main Red Bull team. He wants to be partnering Max Verstappen for next year, and that's still a very real possibility. He needs good, strong results over these last two races, and the sprint is the very first opportunity to do that. I think coming into SQ3, one of the interesting factors is everybody will switch onto the soft tyre for the final part of qualifying. It's mandated. Everyone will go onto that red walled soft tyre. We do see different cars performing to slightly different degrees depending on the tyre they're on, and given that everyone's going to make this switch, we might just start to see some subtle tweaks in terms of the competitive order through the likes of McLaren, maybe like Mercedes, like you said, Harry. This is a real close one to call. I'm not sure who out of that top 4 or 5 is going to end up coming out on top.
Well, absolutely. Well, into that little break before we get the final part of sprint qualifying done and dusted. So let's check in with Rosanna Tennant.
It's interesting, isn't it, Harry, that the three teams embroiled in that battle for P6 in the Constructors' Championship are having a real bittersweet evening. You've got Yuki Tsunoda out in Q1 for RB, but meanwhile his teammate makes it through to Q3, Liam Lawson. Alpine the same, Esteban Ocon out in the first part. Pierre Gasly managing to make it through to Q3 as well. And similarly, Haas, Kevin Magnussen out in SQ1, and Hulkenberg hanging on in there, P8 in that last part of SQ. So when all those three teams need both drivers scoring or at least nibbling into the top 10 this weekend, it's tricky when one driver can and one driver can't.
It makes it fairly even though, doesn't it? One apiece.
It does make it even. Yes, it does, but you know, it's just interesting, isn't it, that there has been that bigger split between SQ1 and SQ3. Keep forgetting we're in sprint qualifying, not qualifying.
Only one more to go, Rosanna. This is it. Then we're done for the season.
I think I'm just about over the transfer of time, should we call it, between Las Vegas and Qatar. Yes, it's been a week. It has been a week.
And just, Rosanna, in terms of how the temperature and the conditions are where you are, we had quite a lot of wind in practice earlier, but that's died down a bit, has it?
Yeah, it's definitely less windy. There is still a little bit of a breeze. There are quite a few trees running down the middle of the paddock here, and the leaves and branches are fluttering slightly, and it is really chilly. My hands are freezing, and I am wearing a puffer jacket. So yeah, really interesting conditions to deal with here. And like we were saying earlier on, you come to the desert, you expect roasty toasty, don't you? But it has not been like that thus far this weekend, and I think it's set like this for the next couple of days too. So those who are strong now in sprint qualifying, it looks like it could suit them for the rest of the weekend, because it's not getting a lot hotter. And I tell you what, I had a couple of raindrops on the way to track yesterday, so yeah, it's crazy weather here.
Well, it's nice and roasty toasty in the commentary box, isn't it? Mark Priestley, Andrew Benson alongside myself, Harry Benjamin. That was Rosanna Tennant down in the pits for us. You're listening to live coverage of sprint qualifying for the Qatar Grand Prix. It's the final sprint of the season. We're at the penultimate round of what is the longest season ever in Formula One history, and we're about to go into battle in this first qualifying for the sprint. Norris, Russell, Piastri, Hamilton, Verstappen, the two Ferraris, they're all in the hunt.
They really are, and I think what Rosanna's just touched on there, the temperature's down at 18 degrees now. We're in the desert where last year it was over 40 degrees and we saw drivers collapsing from heat exhaustion. It couldn't be more different, and that, I think, is what's brought Mercedes really into play here. We know that they bring their tyres alive and are able to look after them much more so in the longer stints of a race in these cooler temperatures, whereas others find it difficult to warm the tyres up in conditions like this. So the temperature has really shifted the competitive order and brought Mercedes back into a picture that they didn't think they were going to be part of here.
No, and this could be, by the way, a winning weekend for McLaren in the Constructors' Championship. They're 24 points ahead of Ferrari right now. They could clinch it this weekend, but to do that, they need to finish 1-2 in the sprint race. They need to finish 1-2 in the Grand Prix and take the fastest lap as well to seal it here. The likelihood, well, it's not impossible, but let's hope it goes down to the wire in Abu Dhabi. That would be something spectacle. McLaren, a first championship since 1998. Ferrari, a first championship since 2008. The prospect is tantalising, and Red Bull, with just the one car scoring big points, they're not in that fight.
No, they're not, and that is something that I have no doubt they will be seriously looking at. The reasons why are plain for everybody to see. They can't go into another year with one arm tied behind their back like this, and they will need to make changes, and that's why the fight further back, the fight between Lawson and Tsunoda, the performances of people like even Colapinto, who are being talked about as a potential to slot into somewhere into that Red Bull program, these people are all fighting for their Formula One careers at this point. So the fact that Liam Lawson has made it through and Tsunoda knocked out in Q1 will be big for those guys.
Well, the green light is on then for this final part of sprint qualifying. SQ3 with 7 minutes and 35, 34, 33 seconds remaining as we set the top 10 and find out who will start the sprint from pole position around this Losail International Circuit. We're just north of Doha. We're about 10 kilometres away from the Losail Football Stadium, home to Argentina, clinching the World Cup a couple of years ago. 5.4 kilometres just over that, 3.3 miles. This circuit made up of 16 turns, 6 to the left and 10 to the right. It's a high downforce track featuring high medium speed corners, long duration corners on a smooth surface as well, with a just over 1 kilometre start finish straight where the DRS zone is, which has been slightly shortened this year, and also having to then stamp on the brakes. We're just seeing a replay of the pits. Max Verstappen having to stamp on the brakes. I didn't quite catch which car that was pulling out in front of him though.
It was Gasly's
Alpine. Unsafe release, slam dunk.
I think Max made a meal of it, if I'm really honest. He probably could have slowed down, but instead of just slowing down, he slowed down and veered right alongside him to make his point. I'm not sure there'll be too much at play there. It could have been done smoother, but it wasn't. There we go. I'm really looking forward to this session because I think we could get very fine margins between the top 4 or 5 drivers, and at the moment I can't call it. I don't know which way that's going to go, and the reason I say that is that I think the temperatures, which are still falling now below 18 degrees, that's dropped by 3 degrees since the start of this qualifying session here. So tumbling temperatures will change the competitive order. A new switch to red-walled soft tyres, that will also change the order, and of course all the while the circuit is ramping up as more and more rubber goes down. So all the parameters that the drivers and teams have had to get used to in the build-up to now are still shifting and changing. They're having to adapt as they go.
9 drivers out on the circuit. Nico Hülkenberg has stayed in the pits. I would suggest then Haas going to go just for one running out of sync with the rest of the field. They'll get a clear batch of field, but they might not benefit from the track evolution right at the very end. But 5 minutes and 25 remaining. First laps being set. Gasly's gone well in the first and the middle sector. Lawson will be the first car to come across the line, and they are on their first flying laps. Lando Norris and Piastri just coming to an end on their outlap. So who is it going to be then on sprint pole under the lights at the Losail International Circuit? The sun is well and truly set, and the floodlights that illuminate this circuit are in full beam. And even though it's qualifying, some of the cars getting a little bit racy on track. Max Verstappen just making sure he finds the bit of space in front of the Ferrari of Carlos Sainz that gives him a nice clear view coming into the turn 12, 13 and 14 triple right-hander complex to line himself up nicely for his first flying lap.
Yeah, so the key to these laps is really in the prep lap, the out lap from the pits, warming up the tyres, getting them into the right temperature window. We keep talking about tyre temperature, but it's so crucial to generating grip. And if you're just outside of that window, almost all of the grip disappears and the car feels like it's riding on ice. So that prep lap is something that's so critical. And of course, on these soft tyres, they haven't really had that opportunity to run and try these things out. So this is a learning curve that's very, very steep. This is the very first run. We've got 4 minutes left on the clock. They get the opportunity to go one more time, and everything they learned on this one, they get one opportunity to put that into practice.
Charles Leclerc has set the benchmark then, fastest lap time, a 1:21.7 in the scarlet red Ferrari. Gasly is 6/10 adrift in second, but it's Lando Norris in the papaya McLaren who is fastest of anybody in the first sector, fastest of anybody in the middle sector. He's almost half a second up on the Ferrari. Going quick too is his teammate Oscar Piastri, but Norris has got more pace in hand right now and has looked the stronger of the two McLarens in the only practice session we've had into this qualifying. Round the final corner for the British racer, now out of contention for the title. Can he secure second spot in the Drivers' Championship? Wow. Right now he goes top by nearly 7/10 of a second. Piastri slots in behind.
That's a huge lap, and Piastri, just behind him, about 1.5. So the two McLarens with the early marker down, nothing in response yet anywhere near from anyone else. The Ferrari of Charles Leclerc with that earlier run, the closest rival to them, but he's nearly 7/10 back. That's a huge gap at this stage.
Verstappen's had a good final sector. 3/10 down though puts him into third ahead of the Ferrari of Leclerc. George Russell keeping Mercedes in this one, has looked the stronger of the two Mercedes so far. He's up to third, but Hamilton is fastest of anybody in the first sector. Hamilton, who ruled his qualifying in Vegas last week, perhaps could have won the race, had to settle for second as he carved his way through the field. In this sprint qualifying, crosses the line, losing time in that final sector. 4/10 down, puts him fifth.
Yeah, decent lap from Hamilton. I think decent in terms of not what they expected to be, but I think he'll always be matched against his teammate, and once again he finds himself behind George Russell, as he so often does in qualifying. But I think that's better than most people thought they'd be able to achieve, and maybe there's still more to come. Certainly still more to come from the Ferrari. We're just seeing a replay of Charles Leclerc, which may be the reason he lost a bit of time. He did big snap of oversteer in the penultimate corner, so that would have cost him a little bit. In fact, it would have cost him a decent chunk of time. So there's more to come still. These are the first runs. One more run from everybody, and this is not over.
No, less than 2 minutes on the clock. It's Norris, Piastri, Russell, Verstappen, Hamilton, the top five. Then it's Leclerc. Gasly's ahead of Lawson. Sainz is down in ninth. Nico Hülkenberg has just come out onto the track for his one and only flying lap. Waited for most of this session, but he is now out there on the circuit, making his way through the right-hander of turn 3. Hülkenberg has reached the final part of sprint qualifying in 3 out of the 6 sprint weekends this year, and his 8th place in Vegas last time out moved Haas back into that coveted 6th place in the Constructors. What could Hülkenberg do to keep Haas in the fight? He'll be hoping to out-qualify in this sprint race Gasly and Lawson. Gasly for Alpine, Lawson in the RB. Hülkenberg at the moment coming through the right-hander of turn 9, which arcs into the left-hander of turn 10, making his way now up towards the triple right-hander of 12, which feeds into 13. The Alpine of Gasly gets nicely underway. Some sparks flying from the underside of that Haas as he runs over the curbs, keeping his foot in it. It's neat and tidy from Hülkenberg, if not setting the sector times alight. Decent in the middle sector. Can he hold it through into this final sector? Round the final corner, the pit lane entry to your right. Hülkenberg with his foot to the floor and across the line. Does the job for Haas. Out-qualifies Gasly and Lawson at this stage. A second down on Norris, but it's enough for 7th place for the German.
Yeah, really good tidy lap from Hülkenberg, actually. He had the advantage of a circuit that is evolving with more soft tyre rubber down, but the disadvantage, of course, of not having 2 runs like almost everyone else has to learn on the first one and put it into practice in the second one.
Norris is calling time. He can't go quicker and is coming to the pits. Piastri doesn't go quicker either. He does take the line. The checkered flag is now out. Not many improving out there. Max Verstappen is down in 4th. Decent first sector. Can George Russell do anything to split the McLarens? Indeed, can he nick sprint pole, which at the moment is going the way of Lando Norris? And what about the 2 Ferraris? They will not be happy with 6th and 10th. Carlos Sainz currently down in 10th and improving. Verstappen fastest in the final sector, still not quick enough overall to improve on his lap time. What about George Russell, who's coming to the line now? He can split the McLarens. He puts it up into 2nd. His teammate Hamilton is down in the first sector and in the middle sector, and he finds time at the end but has to settle for 5th. Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, the 2 Ferraris, need to show their hand now. It's a good lap from both of them. Sainz will cross the line first. He can't pit the 2 McLarens, has to settle for 4th. But what about Charles Leclerc? He's down in the middle sector though, takes the line, can't beat his teammate. The 2 Ferraris left to settle with 4th and 5th. Verstappen knocked down to 6th ahead of Hamilton as Gasly takes the checkered flag as well. And that'll be it for sprint qualifying, and sprint pole goes to Lando Norris, his 2nd of the season. George Russell in the Mercedes will line up alongside him. Oscar Piastri 3rd, then comes the 2 Ferraris. Sainz ahead of Leclerc. Max Verstappen is 6th, Hamilton 7th, Gasly, Lawson and Nico Hülkenberg in the end shuffled down to 10th. Rosanna.
Wow. Well, I think people had the McLarens down, potentially as the favourites this weekend. So Lando Norris has done what perhaps was expected, but George Russell managing to split the McLarens, perhaps that was a bit more unexpected. But these cold temperatures, we've been talking about it through the whole session, it continues to drop in temperature here in Qatar. So maybe that helped George Russell propel himself up towards the sharp end of the sprint grid. But meanwhile, his teammate Lewis Hamilton unable to capitalise on those conditions. And P7 disappointing, another big split between those 2 drivers.
Yeah, it certainly is, as Lando Norris gets out of the car, takes his balaclava off and has a little shake of the head as well. Did the job, bailed on his final flyer, but didn't need it in the end. Did he run wide? He did run wide. I think that was on turn 15. There's usually the culprit there with the strip of gravel right on the exit, and that was where Norris decided that was it for him. But he'll be happy with that. I think happiest man might well be George Russell in the Mercedes.
Yeah, I was going to say there's probably 3 big surprises for me. One is George Russell being as high as he was. The other is Charles Leclerc not being able to deliver something better than that, because I thought he'd be right up there challenging for the front row, but the middle sector really let him down. He had a massive snap of oversteer coming out the final corner as well, so he lost a lot of time there. And the other surprise is Max Verstappen being down in P6. I genuinely thought he'd be much further up than that.
Well, let's hear from our sprint qualifiers. They're down in Parc Fermé, talking to James Hinchcliffe.
Lando Norris, pole for tomorrow's sprint race. What an incredible lap for you. It looked so fierce and so fast out there on the racetrack. Just walk us through a lap around here.
It's tough because it's so quick around here. You know, it's probably, it feels like the quickest circuit of the year. I mean, it's like the final sector just feels like you're just hanging on, you know. So yeah, I mean, great qualifying today, especially to bounce back from where we were last time out in Vegas. It's a nice thing to do. So happy. Was a decent lap. I made a couple of too many mistakes on my second. But we were coming here to get pole, and we did that, so job done for today.
Last year when you guys raced here, so much was made about the conditions, the temperature being so hot. It's a lot cooler. Is that making the track faster? And how tough was it to kind of adjust to the different conditions with only one practice session?
Yeah, I mean, it's the wind plays a big part, but the conditions are also a lot better than last season. Makes it a lot tougher physically, but also makes it a lot quicker to drive, so I'm not. I don't know. I struggled too, but I think some of the other cars are close to being flat in most of the corners in the final sector, and that's quite an accomplishment, so it feels quick, and when it feels quick, it must be very fast, so it's a challenge out there. Not easy to put a lap together, especially because the tires they don't feel in for the beginning, and then kind of through the lap you gain confidence. So that's been the challenge of today, but it's paid off. We made some good improvements into qualifying, and I was happy with it.
All right, so looking forward to the sprint race tomorrow. How much of it is a kind of a test session for the Grand Prix on Sunday, or are you just kind of focused on the best result tomorrow?
I mean, I want to win. We want to win every session as drivers, so our target is a 1-2. We want to maximize points for our constructors today, so yeah, we want to go for it. We know it's going to be a battle. We know Mercedes will be quick, Ferrari will be fast. So not expecting an easy one, probably expecting an exciting one for everyone watching. So looking forward to tomorrow.
All right, we can't wait. Best of luck tomorrow.
Lando Norris then takes the sprint race pole, his first pole since the opening sprint weekend of the season back in China. We'll have the best view in the house ahead of tomorrow's 100-kilometre dash as his car up on the jacks in Parc Fermé now gets wheeled away by the mechanics, and we'll have the FIA checks. He's presented with the trophy, I will call it a trophy, for pole with Mario Isola from Pirelli. So that is all we'll be hearing from Lando Norris. Ahead of Russell, then comes Piastri in third, Sainz fourth, Leclerc fifth, Verstappen, Hamilton, Gasly, Hülkenberg, Lawson the top 10, Alonso, Albon, Bottas, Stroll, Magnussen the top 15, Perez down in 16th ahead of Tsunoda, Ocon, Zhou and Colapinto, the 20 drivers that make up the field. And well, Mark, I suppose it's advantage McLaren and Norris.
Yeah, they look like they're very comfortable around this racetrack. The car has really transformed from where it was just a week ago in Vegas. A very different type of circuit, of course, but last time out they were struggling to get the best out of that car, couldn't find the grip anywhere, and that grip came to the likes of Ferrari and certainly to Mercedes. This time around, in these conditions, on this type of racetrack, which, as he said, very, very fast around here, very open and flat and smooth, and that seems to suit this McLaren. So yeah, advantage McLaren.
Absolutely. And Rosanna, though, George Russell putting Mercedes up there in second, but Hamilton then again with another lackluster qualifying down in seventh.
Yeah, unable to get on top of things. Of course, only one practice session. Was that a reason why Lewis Hamilton didn't do as well as his teammate George Russell? Harry, it's interesting coming into this weekend. A lot of the journalists were asking George Russell if the win in Las Vegas gave him a bit of a confidence boost. And he said, I don't need a confidence boost. I've been challenged all year long by my teammate, 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton. And that therefore doesn't mean I really need a confidence boost, because of course under what he is saying, you get the feeling he has proven that he is a very good racing driver, and he's been outperforming Lewis Hamilton, and yet again we've seen that happen this evening here under the lights in Qatar.
Absolutely spot on, Rosanna. Thank you very much, Rosanna Tennant, Mark Priestley, Andrew Benson. That is it for our coverage of sprint qualifying. Lando Norris will start the sprint from pole position. Alongside him will be George Russell. You can hear that in full live on 5 Sports Extra. Will be on air from 1:55 in the afternoon on Saturday, and that is not all of your F1 fix this evening. You can join us over on BBC Radio 5 Live, where the whole team will be out in force to preview the whole weekend. We'll be live from 9 o'clock. Hope you can join us for that. If you miss it, don't worry, it will pop up on your checkered flag feed as well, wherever you get your podcasts. We'll see you later or tomorrow, whenever you can get us. In the meantime, this has been an IMG production for BBC Radio 5 Live.